Yeah. New guys coming to you live. You could bet this like Jerome. New guys are men of steel. Best coverage in the league. Prime Reavers on the field. Don't know better ask. Nick, the hype is real. Gurus with the knowledge, you can check the mass appeal. They gon' turn your fantasies into dollar bills, making dynasties from drafts like the Spurs when they build. Want the bragging rights and titles at your work. Let the new guys serve the wisdom to you first. I ain't advertising, just kicking facts. They turn average Joes to Drakes cause they winning back to backs. So sit back, relax, all ears when they speak, and rain on competition with anything they leak. Make leagues joy gray like Ramsey did Reek. Passing off the mic, I'm out here, peace.
Howdy fans, welcome. Nick and I took a bye week last week. He was busy with school and I was actually in Seattle for a 2-day conference, but I spent some extra time there just seeing the sights. So we're back this week, and it's a very good week to be back because a lot has been going on around the league with the NFL trade deadline looming. Nick, how you doing down there?
Pretty good, feeling well rested, off bye, ready to get back into it.
Perfect. Just worth mentioning, we're going to do something a little different. We're going to go through a bunch of things we feel are major that have been happening around the league. And Nick and I are actually opponents in both of our leagues this week. So we're going to discuss who we're thinking of starting, who we're thinking of sitting, why. So we'll get into specific players later on. And just for housekeeping purposes, Nick and I have that weekly pick'em bet going. Up until last week, he actually closed the gap and tied it up at 4-4. We had 3 different games last week, and I hit on all 3. So currently the tally is 7-4 in my favor. So, Nick, I want to start with probably the most impactful decisions over the last week or so, which both happen to be regarding the Oakland Raiders. First of which, Marshawn Lynch going on IR. I want you to get into who you view this benefiting the most, Doug Martin, Jalen Richard, or DeAndre Washington, and also them trading away Amari Cooper for a first-rounder to Dallas. When you get into that, just let me know, how does this affect his value and both teams as well, and any other players it might give more targets to, take away from. Just dive into the Raiders' decisions this past week.
Yeah, so some crazy stuff with the Raiders. John Gruden is building his own team. No one's safe. And really proved that point by trading away probably their best offensive weapon in Amari Cooper, number 4 overall pick a couple years ago. Hasn't been great in the league, but he's been good. He's been a good wide receiver. But they get a first-round pick out of it, which I think is awesome for the long-term view of the Raiders, because if you're rebuilding, an aging wide receiver isn't going to do too much. So now they have 3 picks in the upcoming draft, which is awesome, and it should help them a lot. From a fantasy perspective, though, I don't know if you'd be starting him on the Raiders anyway. He hasn't really been performing too well. I think he only had 240 yards this year and a touchdown or something. It wasn't great numbers. But Dallas finally gets that playmaker in the passing game that they've needed, really, since Dez, since Witten left. But I don't know if it has that much of a fantasy impact for them. Just because of the nature of the offense, it's still a run-first offense. Dak isn't really a gunslinger. I do think he'll finish as the number 1 wide receiver on the team, but I still wouldn't expect too much drastic numbers out of him.
Okay, yeah, I tend to agree. I think his role is going to be more steady on Dallas. He's going to be the clear-cut receiving option, whereas the Raiders tended to go based on game flow and game plans. One week it was Jordy Nelson, one week it was Jared Cook. So I think Cooper will have a more steady role going forward with Dallas. I do think when all said and done, he may end up having less of a target share because, like you said, that is a run-first team. They want to, pound the rock with Zeke, run the clock, and that's typically the way Dallas plays. So I think less volume, but still more consistent production, which is what fantasy owners want to see. As for Dallas receivers, no one was really startable. Potentially, no real impact. Just Cooper, I'd say. If you had Michael Gallup, I'd drop him at this point because now he's sliding back on the depth chart. For Oakland, though, I think it benefits Jared Cook and Jordy Nelson mostly, but potentially I want to say Martavis Bryant because they re-signed him after initially cutting him earlier in the year, and that's a lot of routes to be run. That's a good portion of the targets that are now up and open. So I think it could potentially lead to Martavis Bryant emerging, but I want to wait and see how that plays out before making any drastic lineup changes. Lynch going on IR. I guess I'll take this one. Jalen Richard's role has been pretty consistent. He is their best pass-catching back and tends to be utilized more in the second half when Oakland gets down, which is a trend I don't see disappearing considering they're in full tank mode. So I don't think he sees a significant boost in production, maybe a couple more snaps or carries, but nothing major. If you were starting him based on your roster construction, you still are. If you weren't, maybe he's a good bye-week fill-in. But I don't think he has a significant change in his role. I think it impacts Doug Martin. He's going to see the bulk of the carries on first and second down. But even when he has gotten a handful of carries in a game, he hasn't really produced. So again, I'd say a wait-and-see approach.
I agree with most of that. I still think it'll tend to be more of a committee. I do probably like Richard the most, but not enough to start in the lineup unless I was in dire need of a running back.
Okay.
So I don't expect too much out of him. I just think he might be the most explosive. So maybe he'd have the best, opportunity at breaking one for 70 yards or something. That's really it.
Okay, fair enough. Moving on, I want to touch on Gang Green, the other New York team, because they have a couple things going on there. Quincy Enunwa is still out indefinitely. They recently released Terrell Pryor, who had a groin injury, and they just signed Rashard Matthews. So a receiving corps that was desperate for talent decided to take a flyer on the former Titan in Rashard Matthews. Do you feel like he's going to step in and immediately replace Pryor and Enunwa during his absence? Do you think he'll push for the Jets' top receiver spot against Robbie Anderson, or do you think it's just something to monitor and nothing significant?
Yeah, I don't think it's too significant. I think he'll step in and be the number two with those two guys that you just mentioned out. I still think Robbie Anderson's the one. I think he's the best deep threat on the team.
Mm-hmm.
This isn't really a gunslinger offense. Arnold just looks good, but he's not looking like Mahomes or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think the number two wide receiver in the Jets offense is worth really starting or anything.
Okay. I agree. Sam Darnold's been more conservative, compared to Baker Mayfield and, like you said, Patrick Mahomes. He's had a more conservative approach during his first season in the NFL. And I agree. I think he's going to continue to favor Quincy Enunwa and the shorter, higher percentage routes once he returns. And the way I see it, if Rashard Matthews couldn't beat out Tajay Sharp, Tywan Taylor, and Corey Davis, he's not going to beat out Robbie Anderson and Quincy Enunwa for targets. So, Eli McGuire returned to practice as soon as he was eligible. He is eligible to play not this week, but next week. Do you think this impacts the work of Isaiah Crowell and Bilal Powell?
Not significantly. I think in Crowell, especially Crowell hasn't looked that good this year, but I think Crowell's looked pretty good for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
And he'll probably have this yards cannon at that per game. Yeah, but
Yeah, he went off. 219, I think it was.
Yeah, so at this point, I don't really see them giving McGuire significant snaps right away, just because you might as well keep the ball rolling.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe this season I could see him getting more. But even if he did start getting snaps, it'd be more of a committee. It wouldn't be more of a focus on him. So I wouldn't read too much into it.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. I don't think he's going to step in and become their top running back, especially when the Jets have been effective running the ball thus far with their two current backs. I do think he will get a look potentially sooner, depending on how the next week or two goes. The Jets are 3-4, so I don't think they're going to make the playoffs, but they may prove me wrong there. They're still in contention in their division, so potentially, if things go bottom up, they might want to get a good look at him and see what he can do. But let's say they win this week without him and he comes back at 4-4. Why not ease him back into it and stick with what's been working? So I agree with you. I think it's going to become a 3-back committee, but you still feel fine about Crowell and Powell, and you don't really want to start McGuire. I'm going to give you this next one because I'm going to take the following one. Last week, your boy, Marlon Mack, went absolutely nuts. So, what type of clarity do we have with the Colts backfield now?
I think he's definitely the starter. You're going to play one, you play him. I know Hines had a couple good games, but that was more long catches, down by a lot, screen passes, stuff like that. I'm not going to really count Wilkins too much of this because he's more of the, you need 1 yard, you're going to give it to him. So he's definitely the odd man out. I think Hines could still be startable in some cases in a PPR league. Because maybe the Colts go down, they use him a lot on screens and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But I think Marlon Mack's the guy. I know it was one game, and you can't read too much into it.
Mm-hmm.
But while the Bills might be an awful team, their defense isn't an awful team. They had top 7 defense going into that game, ranked in the NFL. Played well against Minnesota. Didn't play awful against Green Bay. So it definitely isn't that bad of a defense. And he was running all over them.
Mm-hmm.
So I definitely would start him if you have him, especially this week against the Oakland Raiders, just because their defense is probably much worse. And I know the Colts are going to try to do the same thing with game script, get the run going early, develop play action. So that's really my take on it.
I agree, and we're going to get a little more into Marlon Mack later when we discuss our matchups because he is someone that Nick has stock in. So we'll backtrack to that later on. Next, the Giants appear to be fully embracing their tanking. I know the game plan wasn't tanking this year, but when you're off to a 1-6 start and the Redskins are 4-2, it becomes time to sort of look at what you're doing and take a step back and start getting ready for next year. So the Giants have traded away corner Eli Apple, a former first-round pick, to the Saints. In return, they've received a 4th-round pick for next year and a 7th round in 2020. I think trading away Eli Apple doesn't really affect our defense that much. What we got out of him, I think we could have gotten a 3rd because of his pedigree as a first-round pick. But last year he was a cancer in the locker room. He had a great rookie year, a terrible sophomore year, and then an up-and-down 3rd year this year. So, really, with what we got for him, I'll take it. But I don't think it affects the Giants' defense too significantly. For the Saints, it gives them a better corner than what they had. I know they were going after Peterson in Arizona, and I guess there was a disconnect and that fell through. The Cardinals didn't want to trade one of their superstars, understandably so, even though they're also one of the bottom teams in the league. As for player workloads, if the Giants have embraced the tank, and I'm just going out on a limb, I could be wrong here, but the shelf life on running backs is smaller than most other positions in the league. maybe they scale back a little bit, very slightly, Saquon's workload. A couple carries less a game. He'll still be an RB1, and again, that's just a hunch, but at 1-6, you want to protect him for years when we can be competitive, which so far this season doesn't appear to be. So I could be wrong, just a limb, but something to keep an eye out on.
That's a good take. I actually haven't heard that yet, but that makes a lot of sense right there.
Yeah, it's just something, knowing the Giants and looking at the direction we're heading, it's something they should consider. And I don't talk to anyone in the organization, but I thought it made sense. So Nick, let me go back to you. The Bengals have declared that John Ross could potentially be out for a couple weeks now. Does this affect Tyler Boyd or AJ Green in any way? Tyler Boyd had a pretty pedestrian performance last week without John Ross, who is a speedster. He has similar traits to John Brown or a much lesser Tyreek Hill. And I know he hasn't really been productive on the field, but it's something defenses have to take into consideration with him out. Does this affect the Bengals' offense?
I don't think too much. He wasn't doing too much, as you said. I don't know his numbers this year, but they weren't good by any means. But that is an important thing. Defenses do pay attention to that, especially free safeties shift over his way, give an extra step back. So it matters. I don't think it'll matter too much, especially for AJ Green, just because he's AJ Green. He's going to produce no matter what.
Yep.
Maybe Tyler Boyd, they can focus a little bit more attention on now, but he's still having a good year. I wouldn't panic about him yet after one bad game.
Yeah, he had 3 for 27 last week at Arrowhead, and I have no concerns with him going forward. Same, he might receive a little more attention, but it was just a game where AJ Green played really well and just a bad performance. It happens. Young player on the road against a red-hot Kansas City. So I expect a bounce-back game for Boyd. Xavier Rhodes had an MRI. It's been revealed he has an ankle sprain, but we don't know the severity. Odds are he's going to miss this week. It was assumed that had he been able to play, he would shadow Michael Thomas this week. The Saints will be playing on the road in Minnesota. I want to get your opinion on how this affects Thomas's outlook. I mean, I think he was still maybe a back-end wide receiver one, and with Rhodes out, top 5 performance this week. Is that what you expect too?
Yeah, it's definitely a big increase, especially because that Vikings secondary hasn't looked great this year. They've been torched by the Bills, which is not a great look.
The Rams.
And really what comes to mind is that Rams game at Thursday Night Football. The Rams put 40 points on them. And now you're taking away their best corner, who's one of the best in the league, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't even know who's going to cover Michael Thomas, maybe Alexander, your brother's boy at Clemson, or
Go Tigers.
And I think there are other cornerbacks out isn't he out for the season? The guy they drafted this year from UCF, Mike Hughes.
Oh, the rookie? I think so. I believe so. That happened a while ago, I think.
I think that was like last week or something. So that's their top 2 corners out. So I expect not even just Thomas. I expect the whole Saints offense just to light it up.
Okay. Fair enough. And with Mark Ingram back, they have a nice 1-2 punch again. Kamara, Ingram, fire them up. I just want to get your opinion on this. Julio Jones went and did Julio Jones things last night against the Giants. He went off for over 100 yards again, which is something he usually does. He's actually second in the NFL in yards this season. But once again, he did not get into the end zone, which is just baffling. We're sitting here 7 weeks into the season. They're going on a bye this week. But, everyone said Julio Jones doesn't get touchdowns, and it's sort of been an ongoing thing. But I don't think anyone expected us to sit here halfway through the season essentially, and him having 400-yard games and no touchdowns. So can I just get your opinion on what's going on in Atlanta?
Yeah, I don't know what's going on. It's been, when was his last one? Week 15 of last year or something? Or week 14?
Dating back to last year, I think it's been, I don't remember where, but I read a stat. I think it's been about 12 games since his last touchdown.
And he might be the best receiver in football, but that killed his fantasy value. And that's what we said at the beginning of the year. He doesn't get touchdowns.
Mm-hmm.
He got that one halfway through the season. But it really hurts his fantasy value. That's 6 less points he should be getting each week.
Yep.
So I don't know if it's just defenses knowing it's going to go to him in the red zone and focusing on him, or just bad play calling. But
There just seems to be a disconnect, though. Defenses know it's going to him, yet he marches down the field at will, and they can't stop him.
I don't know, maybe he's just better in open space. I'm not sure, but Atlanta should figure that out, because they got one of the biggest weapons, best weapons in the whole league, and they're not even using it right. That could be why they only have 3 wins, and they're projected much more.
Yeah, their defense did get hit pretty hard this season, but still, they've been one of the more disappointing teams in the league. I do want to get your opinion of apparently another big playmaker, and it's not Mike Williams, it's your boy Tyrell Williams for the Chargers. Back-to-back weeks. Ready for this? Back-to-back weeks, he has had 118 yards each week.
He had 2 touchdowns last week. Did he have any this week?
So last week 3 for 118 and 2 scores. This week 4 for 118 and 1 score. So he has been making the most out of limited targets, sort of like what Austin Eckler had been doing up until this week on limited carries. So do you think he's grasped wide receiver 2 duties in the Chargers offense, or do you think he's just boomer bust and he's been hot lately?
I think it's boomer bust right now, just because he's a shooter. You say go, runs down the field, Phil chucks it up, and if he gets it. But he's making some catches on these throws. He's not wide open on these throws. The one from last week comes to mind. He went over 3 defenders and just lost it out of the air. So I think he's a really special player. He could probably be a number 1 wide receiver from half the teams in the league, honestly.
I agree. He reminds me kind of like, what was it, 3 years ago, Allen Hurns, where he was behind Allen Robinson on Jacksonville's depth chart, and he just would go off 2 or 3 weeks every month, and he'd just blow by corners and go off for big chunks at a time. And it was just something where, not fluky, but boomer bust, and he just consistently boomed. I agree with you. He'll come back down to earth, but 236 yards and 3 touchdowns in 2 weeks. It's pretty impressive. So I do want to get into something that sort of hits home for both of us, but let me get your opinion first, because it was kind of implied and stated by numerous sources that Le'Veon Bell was going to report during the Steelers' bye last week. Their bye is over, and there's still no signs of Le'Veon Bell. The new rumor is he's going to be back week 9. He has to come back by week 10 in order to get some of his income and to also be able to be a free agent next year, because we all know he wants out of Pittsburgh. Coming back this week, he would be eligible to be traded, but coming back week 9 or later, he would not. The NFL trade deadline is, was it about a week away?
Yeah, it's Tuesday.
Tuesday. Okay, so 6 days away. So there's still a lot of unclarity here. What are your thoughts on him and Connor?
Next week, I know there's a lot of rumors of it, but the whole free agent point you just touched on, how he can't be one next year and all that, blah blah blah. But I don't think he wants to be traded. So that's why I think he'll show up Tuesday afternoon after the
Mm-hmm.
But I know in all my leagues I kept Connor. I didn't deal him. I didn't know what I'd get for him, and I just felt like taking a chance on him. And I'm sticking by that. I'm not getting rid of him. See where that goes from there. I
agree. I have Connor in 2 leagues. 1 league I actually drafted him just in case Bell didn't come back. So, foresight. But I agree. It's hard to really gauge what you could get for him. And he's been producing, I think, even better than the Steelers thought he would. So, I wouldn't trade him. Potentially, though, I'm just going to throw this out there. Call it another hunch. Maybe we see something sort of like the workload split with the Saints. Kamara and Ingram. You have 2 very productive backs who last year were both top 15 for the whole year. I mean, do you think that's something possible in Pittsburgh?
Yeah, I can see that too. Le'Veon being more of the Kamara type and Connor being more of the
Ingram type.
The Ingram type. Not exactly the same because that's really a thunder lightning punch. Le'Veon and Connor are pretty similar, but I can see them doing something like that. And especially there's no hate in that relationship. They tweet to each other all the time. They're good friends. Le'Veon and Connor kind of like Alvin and Ingram. So I could definitely see something like that work towards the end of the season.
Which I think is something Bell wants because a lot of the reason why he's been holding out is his health and workload. He knows the Steelers for years have just run him into the ground, and he wants to be ready for next year for his contract signing, wherever that may be. He's been rumored to be and linked to be going to the Jets next year. We'll see. But if they do end up splitting the workload, that would be beneficial for his health for next year. And I think there is potential. I agree they are more similar in style than Kamara and Ingram are. But James Conner, even after their bye week, has been the 6th most productive running back in fantasy. And Le'Veon Bell's better? Is it fair to say that?
Yeah.
So, maybe Bell gets a dozen carries, 6 targets, and Connor gets 8 carries, 3 targets. Scale back, but still a reasonable amount of work, and I think he could continue to be productive with that because he's proven to be that grinded out, tire out defenses and produce after getting a ton of carries. He wears down defenses, and Bell does that as well. So it's not like the defense won't be worn down. So I could see them both producing, even though they do have similar styles. Let me get your opinion on the New England backfield because Sony Michel is out with a knee injury. How does this impact the Patriots?
I mean, James White's been falling out anyway, even though he's the number 2 guy technically, I think. But you saw it last week. I think he had around 30 fantasy points, and a lot of them came in after Michel went out the game. So I know it's not too serious of an injury for Michel, but still a week or 2. So I should expect around the same as James White. Easier to do it all back. No need to sign another guy or put that much in. He can handle the job for a couple weeks. So I think he should go on for the next 2 weeks, 2 games.
I agree. I think he'll, for the most part, be the bell cow. In the past, he has had injury concerns, but he seems pretty healthy right now. And I wouldn't expect a lot of production, but I'm just assuming a hot waiver wire ad this week is going to be Kenyon Barner because he will be the backup to James White. So if White gets hurt, he's a reasonable stash, but I think people are just going to ultimately end up wasting their waiver claims because Michel will be back, and like you said, White can handle 3-down work in the meantime as long as he stays healthy. So do you agree or disagree? Do you think Barner is going to have value, or I just don't see it?
Yeah, no, I agree. ways become involved. And I don't think if you pick him up this week, I don't think anyone really is going to start him. They probably just keep him on the bench for a week. And if anything did happen to White, Michelle would just send it next week anyway. So
Okay.
I just don't see it working out.
Okay. Sticking with the backfield themes, I have two more for you. Matt Breida was in and out of the game last week for San Fran with an ankle injury. He may or may not miss time. If he does, can you rely on Alfred Morris or Raheem Mostert, or both? Because Raheem has, with just 19 carries over the last 2 weeks, 146 yards on the ground. And not so much 2 weeks ago, but last week he had 4 catches. He was involved in the passing game as well.
Mostert looks pretty good so far. Alfred Morris, I don't see anything. He's looked slow this year, not too much. Out of him.
Too much wear and tear.
People thought it was his job at the beginning, and so did I, but he hasn't really proved anything. Too much wear and tear. Been in the league too long. Just looked explosive with the ball, especially last week in spring day on that Monday night game. He looked awesome. This week, I'm not going to buy too much into it. They were out of the game the entire time. The worst team in the NFL done against the best. You can't really read too much into that. But if Breida's not playing, I would definitely give Mostert a start if I flex or something. I feel like he's proved to at least put the place in first, especially if he's the guy.
I agree. He's sort of earned it at this point just because, 2 weeks ago, Shanahan planned to give him that workload. Again, you said Morris has looked kind of slow. Last week, he was not expected to get that workload. Breida just got hurt, and so it came down to him and Alfred Morris, and 59 yards on 7 carries, but he was not supposed to get those carries, and he still produced. So whether he was a fixture of the lineup or next man up, he's now done it in back-to-back weeks. So the last one, which is sort of intriguing, is Carlos Hyde has now been traded to Jacksonville. That happened last week. He's projected to work with TJ Yeldon until Leonard Fournette comes back, which again, who knows when that'll be. So let me get your opinion on their workload without Fournette and then also with Fournette.
Yeah, this backfield's pretty confusing too. I don't think anybody expected TJ Yeldon to do what he's done last few weeks in fantasy. I think he's the number 10 back, actually, in fantasy points. And that's saying something, considering he hasn't played every single game. He's not in. Now they just added Carlos Hyde. Another, I'd say, top 15 back in the league. He's solid. So for the next 2 weeks, I honestly would probably be comfortable starting Hyde or Yeldon in my flex. Definitely wouldn't rely on him too heavy just because you don't know who's going to get most of the carries. So I'd at least wait out another week just to see what route they go and who gets the carries and who gets the passes and everything. Especially they're going against a pretty good Eagles front this week. But then once Fournette returns, I think it's his show. They drafted him number 4 overall. He's your best guy. I don't think there's any debate about that. So I think he should definitely get at least the first and second down carries once he returns.
Okay. I agree. For a slightly different reason, but I agree. Fournette is the best back in that backfield, even with the addition of Hyde. Adding Hyde benefits Yeldon, who has been improving and impressing every week, it looks like. But he's been a little banged up with this significant workload. So adding Hyde will sort of take some of the workload and pressure off Yeldon, so he'll be able to get healthy. But also, when Fournette comes back, whether it's this week or after the bye, Week 10 against your Colts, Week 10 is pretty far into the season. They're going to want to get Fournette playoff ready. They're going to want to get him reps. They're going to want to get him up to speed with the offense because he just hasn't had that all year. He's had a total of 20 carries all season across 2 half games. So I think once he comes back, which I'm guessing is going to be after their bye, so 3 weeks from now, that would be, he'll get close to every down work, unless they fall behind. He's not much of a pass catcher. But he'll get the bulk of the carries and be the guy at least for a couple of weeks. And then towards the end of the regular season, we may see closer to a split just to rest him before the playoffs. But I think there will be a solid month there where it's just Fournette.
Yeah, I can see that.
And Nick Chubb, I'll let you take that one.
Yeah, Nick Chubb looked good this week. He had 80 yards and a touchdown. Still don't know what to make of that. I think he's definitely the guy there. They still do have Duke Johnson for passing downs, because Chubb is the best catcher. If you have him, I'd start him too. This is a good, young offense, and I think it should continue to get better each week. As the line gets better, Chubb starts seeing more of an active role. Baker gets better. Passing game opens up. So I would definitely keep playing him. Obviously, it depends on the matchup. But I know this week they go against the Steelers, who have not had the best defense this year. So I would definitely start him this week.
Fair enough, I agree. I think it's Chubb's backfield. He pretty much just stepped into the Hyde role. I was a little bit concerned because Duke Johnson, I know he's the pass catcher. He only got one carry, though. One carry, that's not enough. It really, they have to fall behind for him to see the workload, which against the Steelers can happen. But low-key, the Steelers allowed the second fewest amount of yards in the league to tailbacks. They've actually been pretty good against the run. And only less than 21 receiving yards to tailbacks. So, although their defense has been suspect, they've been, for the most part, decent more recently against running backs. So, I'm a little more hesitant on Duke Johnson. But I agree, it's Chubb's backfield, and if you have him, fire him up this week. So, Nick, time for us to get into our matchups. Do you want to start with our 2-flex PPR Dynasty League or our partial PPR Family League?
We can start with the Family League, probably the more serious one.
Sure, Family League it is. Would you like to begin with your roster, or would you like me to begin with mine?
We'll save the best for last, so you can start off yours.
Shots fired. Okay. Well, Nick, up until last week, was undefeated, and then he versed the GOAT in our league, our Uncle Billy O. So there are no undefeated teams. I won as well last week. I've had a rough go of it, kind of. I'm 4-3. Fournette hasn't played. Royce Freeman hasn't played well. I just dropped Derrick Henry because better options became available, and he also hasn't played well. So I've had a rough go of it, but have maintained competitiveness and made some trades along the way to salvage my running back situation. I will be playing at quarterback. I actually have two quarterbacks who are versing each other, Matt Stafford and Russell Wilson. Wilson's coming off a bye, so I think his hamstring will be a little better. He may start to run a little more this week. That being said, I'm leaning towards playing Matt Stafford just because it's a pass-first offense with three very, very solid receivers. Kerryon Johnson can catch the ball in the backfield, and they're home. When in doubt, I like to go with the home team. So I'm leaning towards Matt Stafford. It's close for me, but that's the way I'm going this week. But I do expect a big week from Russell Wilson. I do think he's as healthy as he's been all season long, and he'll start to run again as soon as this week. As for running backs, I'm not expecting to have Leonard Fournette, and as I mentioned, Duke Johnson makes me nervous this week. I don't really have great options. Royce Freeman's banged up too. We don't know if he'll play, so I'm sort of just going with the two that I have that have been productive. They haven't been top 10 or anything like that, but Adrian Peterson and Kerryon Johnson, they've both performed well. They've both had their buys, so I'm just sticking with the two of them for this week at least. I have a major trade in the works right now, so that may change for next week, but this week I'm just rolling with the two of them, and I feel pretty good about it. Carry-on really broke out last week, and Peterson against the Giants, he's getting a significant workload. Chris Thompson may not play again, so fingers crossed. My receivers, I play 3 of these 4 every week. DeAndre Hopkins, Juju, Emmanuel Sanders, and John Brown. They're the only 4 I have, and they're all phenomenal. So I'm just going to go with the matchups. You know, John Brown on the road against Carolina, I think is pretty tough. Sanders, there's been some trade rumors, so they might want to showcase him a little. And then I feel like you can't bench Hopkins or Juju. So I think John Brown's the odd man out this week. Tight end, I actually have 2 back-end tight end ones. O.J. Howard at Cincinnati and Jordan Reed at the Giants. With Eli Apple gone, it makes it intriguing. Up until today, I was leaning towards O.J. Howard, but that's something I'm going to visit later on in the week because I just haven't made up my mind there. And then defense, I have the Bears. Kicker, I have Butker for Kansas City. Enough said about that. Nick, on to you.
Yeah, so it's Colts Mania for my team this week. I'm starting 3 of them. It all starts with the most important one. I got Andrew Luck at quarterback going against Oakland. Not a great defense. And most people might not know, Andrew Luck is currently second in the league with 20 touchdowns. 20 passing touchdowns. He's 2 behind Mahomes right now. But he's really come on strong the last few weeks after a couple poor performances in the year. I predicted that. We said he'd probably be rusty the first month. That was a surprise. But he's looked the part in the last few weeks, man. He's looked like a top 3, top 5 quarterback. And I only expect him to go off against Oakland because this is a defense that hasn't looked great and exposed multiple times this year. So I'm expecting a big game out of him, and along with that, the rest of the team. But I'll get into that later. In my RB1 spot, I got David Johnson. Not ready to sell and hope on him yet. In fact, I think it's the opposite. The Cardinals fired their offensive coordinator on Monday or Friday. I don't know. It was after their game. Mike McCoy. And I think the new guy, the new offensive coordinator, is really going to make it a focal point to get Johnson the ball. I think that's why McCoy was fired. Even the offense was the worst in the league. That's not even debatable. But a big part of it was they weren't being creative. They weren't doing they weren't playing the way guys like Andy Reid, Doug lopsided game. Well, that's what they hope for. And I think they'll be running the ball a ton. So that's what I'm going with. I know it's bold, but I'm not really questioning it too much. Then I have Panthers D against Baltimore. Not great, but I don't hate it. And then Jason Myers as my kicker.
All right, fair enough. And I agree. I think the Colts will go off. I'm hoping that Oakland just steps up for me and shuts down your Colts for 1 week. I'm hoping for Hines and Wilkins to vulture everything, but realistically not expecting that to happen. As you can tell, my team could really use Fournette, so come back soon. Nick is projected to win this pretty handily by a little over 14 points, but a philosophy I've lived by throughout my fantasy tenure: projections mean nothing.
Yep, that's
So
true.
I expect the Bears to bounce back and their defense to bounce back and perform better against the Jets at home than they did against the Patriots at home. So that'll help. And DeAndre Hopkins against Miami, I feel like he'll go off, especially with Kiki probably missing this game. He'll just get a few more targets, but I feel like you just can't stop that man. So we'll see. We will see. We'll keep you posted on how that goes next week. And on to our Dynasty League. Since you let me go first in the other league, I'll let you have at it this time.
Yeah, I actually drafted a lot of the similar players, or I mean the same players in these leagues, so no need to reiterate. I got Luck at quarterback. Running back is where it gets interesting. I have Fournette in this league. He's not out, obviously, as Gerard mentioned. So I can't play him, and Sony Michel also is doubtful this week. He's my running back too, so I cannot play him also. Nevertheless, my running back situation is still not that bad. I have Connor in RB1, and I have Chris Carson in the RB2. And I've been pleased with Chris Carson this year. I think I picked him up right before the season started, but he wasn't projected anything. It was supposed to be Penny's offense and all this. He's really stepped up and played solid. He's coming off the bye, and the week before he didn't do that good. But he's had a few double-digit games, so he's at least startable. So I'll roll with him. In my wide receiver one, Michael Thomas, who we talked about him earlier, going against Minnesota without Xavier Rhodes. I'm expecting him to go off. He's projected 18 points, so I'm not worried about him. I know he'll get. Allen Robinson in the RB2 against the Jets. Jets don't have that great of a secondary. I know Tremaine Johnson, their best corner, missed some time. He missed the Colts game 2 weeks ago. I'm not sure if he played this week. But if he's out, that could be huge for Allen Robinson. And really, Bears offense that's looked good recently of late.
Yeah, it
Started
has.
the season slow with the defense carrying them, but Trubisky's really got it going. And that offense is pretty scary, honestly. So he should benefit. I got Olsen in the tight end. He had a pretty nice bounce back game after the injury. Not too many yards, but he had a touchdown, which was big. You like to see them make him a focal point, especially as that touchdown was to win the game. So it's nice to see Cam relying on him in like that
Nice.
And it's crazy to say he just picked up the defensive MVP. But from a fantasy standpoint, or at least in the way this is scored, he wasn't having that great of a year. But I picked him up right before the game because I had Linval Joseph and he got injured. And he had 4 sacks last week.
He can do that.
20 points. So I don't know if you guys know what an IDP league is, but 20 points is a lot of points for an IDP player, especially a D-line. They usually get around 5 points. So I'm excited about that. Going against Green Bay this week, so it is kind of hard to bring down Rodgers, but you can trust him. He's Aaron Donald. Then as my defensive back, I got Landon Collins, stud, good tackler. Not worried about him. They're playing Washington, so see what happens there. My defense, I have to pick up one. I have the Chargers there on a bye, so I'm not sure who I'm playing yet, but I got the whole week to decide, so not ready to give out that information. And then kicker, I got Justin Tucker, who hopefully will be pissed about that extra point and just hit everything he sees.
He usually does hit everything he sees. Alright, fair enough. I guess I'll take the reins from here. Quarterback. In this league, I also have Matt Stafford, and I have Jameis Winston. I'm not playing either of them. Just not doing it. My starter's Aaron Rodgers, the GOAT, the real GOAT, coming off a bye, expecting him to be healthier, expecting him to have all his receivers back, Cobb, Geronimo. So I'm expecting big things from the Green Bay offense, even with them against the Rams on the road. Best quarterback in football, going with it, not thinking much about it. Running backs, I'm in a sticky situation because I have Zeke on a bye and I have Tevin Coleman on a bye. I also have Darius Geis stashed because it's a dynasty league with IR. So running backs this week, I'm missing my top options, but I still feel pretty good about it because, as you said, the Bears have been looking very formidable recently. And my top option, my RB1 this week, will be Tariq Cohen, who in PPR, in a league where return yards count, he's the 11th best running back in the league right now. So he has a high floor because of the PPR nature and the return yards. And against the Jets, I just feel like that's a game they could win pretty handily. It could be more of a Jordan Howard game, but I just think he has a very high floor because of all of the factors involved. My RB2, someone you said who starts him, I'm starting him, and I'm starting him against you. Jalen Richard. Mostly because I have to, but again, he's had a pretty high floor. He's been the pass catcher in Oakland. Marshawn Lynch is now on IR, and I think it's another game that Oakland falls behind against your Colts, which you're expecting the Colts to go off, which is great for your rosters. I'm expecting that as well, which is not so great for me since I'm versing many Colts this week, but I'm expecting Oakland to be in catch-up mode, and that bodes well for Jalen Richard's workload. He has been a monster, catching 13 passes in the last 2 weeks before leading up to the bye. After that, I have Tyreek Hill against Denver. Denver's got some good corners, but he's been the second best receiver in football. Again, return yards count. He does it all. The cheetah. Same logic with Rodgers. Just, I don't second guess him. He's in every week despite the matchup. After that, I have Josh Gordon as my second wide receiver. He's been on the field for every snap the last couple weeks. And 3 weeks ago, he had a touchdown. Last week, he had 100 yards. No Sony Michel. Last week, there was no Gronk. We'll see if he plays, but he's just such a dynamic athlete that I'm hoping talent wins out there. And at Buffalo, like you said, Buffalo's been surprisingly, sneakily, a top 7 defense, but it's Josh Gordon in a Patriots offense that scores a lot through the air. So I'm not concerned. At tight end, similar to the other league, I'm sitting here debating. I also have O.J. Howard in this one, but I'm leaning towards Trey Burton this week just because Chicago's offense has really come on, and he went absolutely off last week. Trey Burton had 9 receptions, 126 yards, and a touchdown. He's had 3 touchdowns in their last 3 games, 1 each. And Trubisky's been looking for him a lot more compared to the first couple weeks of the season. So I'm going with Burton, but they're both good options. In the flex, I expect bounce-back games from both these players, Kenny Golladay and Tyler Boyd. Golladay at home against Seattle. I just think he's a talented player, and because of his size, it really doesn't matter who's guarding him. It's not the best for PPR since Stafford's going to be spreading the ball around, but I think he's just someone that's hard to bring down. He's a good target in the red zone, and I'm banking on him getting back on track this week. And same with Tyler Boyd. Tampa Bay's defense is abysmal, so I'm not concerned about that. All of their attention is going to be on Mixon and A.J. Green, and I think Boyd will potentially have a field day. And so what did you say about defensive players? If they score, what was it? You said 15 or 20, it's an amazing week?
Yeah.
So my linebacker is your Darius Leonard, who has scored 20 or more 3 weeks, and he didn't play 1 week. He had 17 tackles last week, which isn't even his game high. He had 19 in week 2.
He leads the league in tackles by 15, and he missed the game.
Yeah.
He would face for 200 tackles if he didn't miss that game.
Yeah, so in this league, he's averaging slightly under 15 points per week. So set it and forget it. Same thing with that man. He's a bad man. And it's been great for me. My DL would be, defensive end is Carlos Dunlap for Cincinnati. He's been the 10th best. Not great, not terrible. He's been consistent. So he's averaging slightly under 6 points per game. But what could I say? That's not my strength. He's been consistent. I'll take it. And my DB is actually safety from Arizona, Antoine Bethea, who's been top 5 in regards to the position. And he's also been pretty consistent. The last 4 weeks, he's had 7 tackles, 13 tackles, 10 tackles, 8 tackles. So I'm just expecting somewhere between 8 and 12. It's been top 5. I'll take it. My defense has been actually getting torched in this league. But based on what they did last year, I just can't drop them. Especially because I did draft them pretty high. It's the Jaguars, Saxonville. I hold out hope, even though they are against the Eagles, who, after losing to Carolina last week, I think they're going to be slinging it a lot. But, yeah, Saxonville, from a fantasy perspective, just hasn't been getting it done. I think a lot of that is because of the offense. It's been putting the defense in bad spots because they can't just pound it with Fournette, and Blake Bortles has been terrible. So I don't feel very confident in that, but I'm sticking with them. And my kicker in this is also Butker from Kansas City. So since we mentioned it in the Family League, I will just mention it in this league. I am currently projected to win by 3, but this is before Nick puts in whatever defense he's going to end up picking up. So Nick will be projected to win in this league as well, but projections mean nothing.
Yep, I'll agree with that.
So, Nick, did you have anything else for our crowd today?
I think we're good. Gonna wish everyone a good Week 8, and let's hope your fantasy team wins. It's for you, Gerard.
Absolutely. Nick's going down. Look out for our Facebook page. I'll post our pick'em choices this week, as well as the tally. And best of luck in Week 8.